I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. Hey guys, welcome back to the Drone Camps channel. I'm Justin Davis, and today we're going to do a DJI Phantom 3 standard repair. We had an issue where somebody put the longer screws up inside the motors, and when you do that, it shorts out the motor and damages the motor. Well, this particular one, it happened on all four motors, so I'm going to show you what you need and how to repair it. So the first thing that I suggest that any Phantom owner or person who's going to be flying drones buy is something like the Hakko temperature adjustable model soldering iron. This is a very nice iron. This is what I use to build even my racer drones. Very precise. You can get different size tips for it. For this job, we're probably going to use a medium-sized tip to do all the soldering because the wires are pretty large for each motor going to the ESC on the main board. Now, one of the main reasons that I say to get a nicer soldering iron, and that's under $100, one of the reasons I say to get those is those Weller ones make me crazy. When you hold the pin down on the solder tab, it takes forever to heat up. So just to save yourself some stress and some really bad soldering jobs, get yourself something that goes up to 700 degrees like the Hakko digital adjustable temperature soldering iron. Much better. Now, you're going to need four motors. If you did all four screws, all four prop guard screws, you're going to need four motors. If you only did one of them, just buy one, but buy the one you need. Make sure it's A or B motor, clockwise or counterclockwise. Now, this is a little insert into this video after the fact, but I want to make sure that you guys don't order the wrong motors when you're ordering your motors for your Phantom 3 standard, professional, or advanced. And this applies to all three of these Phantom 3 style motors. If you have the motors that have the vented bottoms, like you see here, make sure that you get the ones with the vented bottoms and don't mix them up with these. These are the older style motors, and these are a different part number. So this is part number 94. And the part number for the other one that matches that one with the vented bottom is going to be part number 95 with that little black top. But you'll notice that if you get this, if you look at it from the very top, this one looks very different from this one. It's been redesigned. It's also taller than the original one, the bell housing and everything. So it just sits a little bit higher up, and you can't mix these up on the quad. I don't believe it wouldn't be a good idea. So make sure you get the right motor for this job, which would be part 94 and part 95 clockwise and counterclockwise motors that look just like this one. Now, you also need some kind of a plastic bag to put all your screws from your clamshell into and save those for later while you're doing your soldering. Now, one of the things that I dislike the most about the Phantom 3 series is the fact that they changed around the bolts on this clamshell. They used to be a standard sort of Allen style hex driver bolt, and no longer. They switched them out to be a more proprietary type of star bit on the very top of it, or a driver bolt. So it's kind of hard to find those drivers, but where do you find them? You get them on Amazon. They're just they come in a kit. It's a Florian multifunction versatile screwdriver set, and there's screwdrivers in here, and they have special tips in here for taking out those star bits. So the T9 one is the one you're going to want to use in this kit, specifically for removing all the screws from the bottom. Now, when you're going to do this, you guys, you don't need to take the landing gear off. We're only going to remove the top, and you actually don't have to take the motor bolts off first. So go ahead and remove the body parts only, and I'll show you that next. But first, the only tools you need after this kit is a set of hex drivers, and those are going to be for the motor bolts. You're going to need the standard Stanley screwdriver set, some small eyeglass style screwdrivers, and this is the driver that actually came in this box. I have it all ready to go with the bit. Now, also guys, I wanted to show you the culprit here. This is the culprit. This is the infamous prop guard screw, and this has 6mm worth of threading on here, and the original one that comes with the motors without the prop guards, it has 4mm worth of threading right here. So just 2 more millimeters will actually damage and short out your motors. Now let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and flip your Phantom over, take the battery out, and make sure your gimbal guard is on so you secure your gimbal. Don't worry about the landing gear, we don't have to remove those. So we're gonna only remove the bolts that are gonna release the top of the clamshell. It'll feel like it's still bolted down even after we remove all the screws. That's because they have tabs inside here now, just to make it extra hard for you. So you're gonna have to really work on this. You're gonna have to use a little bit of muscle to take these tabs off. Now go ahead and we're gonna remove these outside bolts first, and these are the ones that kind of get forgotten about, so I'd like to remove those first before I start working on the bigger bolts on the inside of the arms. So go ahead and grab that Florian multifunction screwdriver kit and look for the bit over here on the top right. It's called the T6 bit, and go ahead and install that on your driver. That's the one that fits this outside little star bolt right there. It'll fit right in there and you can pull it right out of there. So go ahead and remove all 4 corners on each end of each motor. Now after you've got all 4 of those removed, go ahead and start to remove these 2 screws right here and this third one up here on the very top, closest to the gimbal. Go ahead and remove those 3 on each arm, and the driver bit you want to use for that is actually the T9 driver, which was right here. So go ahead, grab the T9 driver bit, put that on there, and once these screws come out, they should look like this. They should have a little bit of Loctite on them. So those look like the 4mm screws. Go ahead and set those in your pile of screws. Now, like I said before, go ahead and grab a Ziploc and start to put all these screws in your Ziploc for your clamshell. Now, like I said, you will notice here that I removed my motor screws. That's because I'm a little further along than you guys are, but don't worry about removing these screws right now. Just go ahead and leave those screws on for now, and I'll show you how to remove those in a moment. So now you're to the point where you can take this clamshell and separate it from the Phantom lower part of the shell. Now this clamshell is a pain in the bleep. Extremely hard to get this off, and DJI, they kind of did this on purpose. They put tabs up inside here so that people like you and I would have an extremely hard time getting into this to mess around with this. Now make sure that your end screws are off. A lot of people forget to do that and then they can't get the clamshell off, but the hardest part is going to be trying to snap this apart, and there's 2 snaps on the inside of each arm right here, and what you're going to have to do is get some leverage on the outside and work your way in, and until you hear these 2 snap up, and it's going to be pretty hard on your hands and pretty hard on your fingers doing this. And once you get one side done, you can sort of start to work your way over. Some people do the method where they grab it from the middle and pinch it. If you have a larger hand, you can pinch and separate it that way, but I know that once you get one side off, you can start working your way around. But before you do that, before you start manhandling your clamshell, go ahead and grab a razor blade and score the side of your stickers so you don't have to peel them off. This is just an easier way, and it looks a little cleaner when you put it back on, so you can keep your stickers. But keep in mind that while you're pulling this clamshell off, there is a wire going to the GPS from the main unit up to the top of this frame. So don't just pull this off and rip away. You're going to pull it off very gently and bring it back like this, because this wire is not very long right here, you can see, so it plugs in back here, but it's actually labeled so you won't miss it. Okay guys, now we're to the fun part. Oh yay, oh joy, look at all this complicated stuff in here. They added the ESCs into the main board, integrated everything in there, so if you lose one ESC, if you're doing this project and you had one of the ESCs go bad during your motor failure, you're going to have to replace this entire board, and this board is around $150, I believe, currently. So that makes it very unattractive for people, because they have to do all this work taking all these cables off of the old board and adding everything back to the new board, also desoldering all of these motor wires and everything. So at that point, after you buy 4 motors and a main board, you might be approaching the price of a new Phantom 3 Standard. So kind of frustrating that is the way it is. Now we'll take a little closer look at one individual arm, and you're going to repeat this process for every single arm if you have 4 bad motors, and this is not super complicated, guys. Don't get too scared. The biggest thing you want to do is make sure that you have a shiny tab once you're done with your solder, and just momentarily apply pressure until you see it start to melt, and once it liquefies, go ahead and take the solder pen off. Very important that you don't hold it there for a long time, because you could separate the pad from the main board. Now while I'm heating up my soldering iron, I'll show you what is what here. They're going to be different on each arm, the way these 3 wires right here are set up coming from the motor. Now on the outside out here we have 2 wires, 2 smaller, thinner wires, and those go to the LED inside the arm right here. Don't worry about those. And there's also a 5 volt, I believe that's a 5 volt red wire coming from the LEDs as well, which powers the LED. So the 2 on the outside and this one on the very outside, we don't worry about those. It's just the 3 big ones on the inside there we're going to worry about. So this should be your signal, power, and ground wire right there. Now before you start removing these old wires, go ahead and grab a pair of tweezers or something. I didn't mention these before, but this is going to help you remove this sort of sticky stuff they have here holding down these wires, because if you start to remove this solder right here and this glue is still here, it's going to be really extremely hard to remove the wire because it's still going to be stuck to the board. So go ahead and remove this stuff right here. Pull this off of the wires one by one. Just make sure it's not stuck down to the board. These wires are going to be pretty tight on the board, so go ahead and work your way across, being careful that you don't sever the wires, the LED wires next to these big wires. And you can just go all the way out to the edge here. Make sure you don't damage these chips right above these main wires, these big wires. So just go ahead and work all this off here, and I should be good to go now to go ahead and remove the larger wires. See, one more little piece there. There we go. Now this first wire you're going to remove, go ahead and pull that out from under, because what they do is they tuck it down underneath like that. Just keeps it out of the way. Go ahead and pull that up and get it ready to pull on it with one hand while you're heating up this solder with the soldering iron. So go ahead and get your 60-40 rosin. This is what I like to use. Most people that build and repair drones use this 60-40. It's 60% tin, 40% lead. So make sure you have a nice ventilation when you're working with solder. So we'll go ahead and apply some pressure there. And I put a little bit of solder on the tip of this. Hot solder on the tip actually helps speed up this process. So if you're above 700 degrees, it should actually do this pretty quickly, and that wire should just pop right off. So we've removed our first wire. And if you want to, guys, you can replace these wires one at a time if you'd like to, or you can take a picture of this, or I can tell you on the board right here it says yellow wire, YW right here, 2 capital letters, and then over here it says BD and BK right here. Obviously that would be BK for black. It actually might say RD instead of BD. So RD would be red wire. And they should be labeled on every single side of this board. I'll use my tweezers again, and I'll pull this wire out from under here. And when you put these new wires on, just go ahead and tuck them back under the way they had them. So now I'm ready to remove the red and the black wire. And I can go ahead and apply a little more. Go ahead and stick that down in your steel wool after you apply some solder to the tip. So I can just put a little more on there as I'm putting pressure on this tab on the red wire. And they're labeled, so I'm not really worried about not knowing where a wire goes when I put one back. It's pretty simple. Okay. And watch out when you're removing wires, guys. Wear safety glasses if you want to, because I've actually had solder fly back up and hit me in the eye, close to the eye. Not right in the eye, but right on my eyelid. Hot solder in your eye would be extremely bad. Okay, so now I have all 3 removed, and you'll see that these don't look as shiny as they did before. Now when we put these back, you want to apply enough amount of pressure here and heat that you have a nice shiny solder surface when you pull back, and that way you have a nice connection. Otherwise, if it looks dull, you have what's called a cold solder. Now I have my new motor here, and the old motor, you can tell that was the older one because the wires are kind of crinkled up. So go ahead and set your bad motor over to the side and grab your bag of screws here, and these are the shorter screws. Go ahead and just put one screw in the very bottom. You can go ahead and do all 4 if you want to with that 2mm hex driver, and go ahead and secure this motor down, and then we'll start putting the new wires onto the board. Now I have my 3 wires running down under here, and I kind of tuck them under, and I sort of S-bent them, sort of an S-bend here, and I have them bent so that they're straight. When I solder this down, I want to make sure that it's nice and flush with the board. Also, you want to make sure that this wire is not too long and touching one of these chips out here, so that you want to make sure that it's perfectly inside the bead of solder and not touching other components on the board. So now you're to the point, you've got your iron hot, and you have your 6040 rosin core solder over to the side here, ready for making your first attempt at soldering up this wire. Now what makes this a lot easier, if you have a pair of fine tip tweezers, or if you have some sort of tweezers that you can get in here, we're going to start with that first wire here, and that's that yellow wire. And what we're going to do is we're going to tin up each wire. We're going to put a little bit of solder on each wire tip, and what that's going to do, it's going to fatten it up a little bit, and it's going to make that connection to the solder tab on the main board a lot easier. So go ahead and tin each wire, putting a liberal amount of solder on each one, and go ahead and grab your tweezers, and we'll do this first one here. So we'll go ahead and we'll heat up that wire and the main board at the same time. Hold your breath and let go. Okay. Now make sure that you don't sever any of the coating on the wire. You don't want that touching the main board. Now another tip for you guys, this is kind of a pro tip. You see how these are nice and shiny here? If they aren't shiny and they look dull when you do these, you might consider taking a solder remover pen, just heating up this tab, and you just push this button and it sucks the solder right off of this. You can get these on Amazon probably for about $5. They're called a solder sucker. And you can do that for each tab, and put new solder on each tab, and you'll have a nice shiny connection there for each wire. And now I'm going to do the next one, so I'm going to put a little more solder on my tip. I'm going to go ahead and clean that off in the steel wool, and take my tweezers and put the red wire where it says RD. I'm going to repeat this process all the way around. And so just that little bit of time there was enough to heat up the pad and the wire. You don't need to press down super hard. This is not about muscling it on the board. Just lightly touch the pad and the wire at the same time, release, and you should have a nice shiny solder. And so now we're good with the right rear motor, and we can move on to the next one. So I know I did my right rear motor, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a check right here so that I know that that one has been repaired, because it's kind of hard to tell that you have new wires in there, a new motor on there. So we'll go ahead now and we'll move to the next one. So now you should be done with all 4 of your motors, and taking special care that you paid attention to BK here, RD, and YW, yellow wire, red wire, black wire. Now they will be different on each motor, and it's important to test motor direction. Once you get all of these soldered up, go ahead, take the propellers off, and what I do is I put a piece of tape on the top of this, and I make sort of a little bit of a flag with it to make sure that when I power up the Phantom, that this little tape spins around a certain direction, whether it's clockwise for the clockwise motor and counterclockwise for the other motor. Very important that you motor test before you put the props on to do your initial maiden after you put your brand new motors on. Now I know you're really excited to put your clamshell back on after you made your repair. Your solders are all shiny, but you want to tuck these wires down underneath right here, just so that they're nice and neat. And you can actually take a little bit of hot glue and just dab it right here where they had glue before. I'm not going to say that's totally necessary. It's kind of overkill, but as long as you have nice solders there, these wires they're not going to move anywhere. And then neatly tuck them along here over top of the LED, mainly because when you put the clamshell on, you don't want any of these wires to be pinched or hanging out the side of the clamshell. Now you're looking at the board from the right hand to the left over here, and in the very back right here, this is where the GPS connector plugs into. So go ahead and put your clamshell over top of your Phantom 3 and go ahead and plug in this little GPS cable. Just like that. The teeth are in the very back. and then go ahead and set your clamshell over top of your Phantom 3. And since you already have your wires all tucked inside there like I showed you, you can just go ahead and work and start to snap the clamshell back down, and you're going to put your screws on next. So now that all of your solders are done, you need to do your motor direction test, and you can do that right on the bench, taking the props off. Get some painter's tape. That's what I like to use, or masking tape. And you can kind of make a little flag on the end of this motor around this top of the motor stem. Very important that you test motor direction before you take it outside and do the maiden after this repair. Very, very important, because if one of your motors is spinning the wrong direction, you're going to have this Phantom violently tip over, and it's definitely not going to fly. Do not attempt to do this test with a prop on there. I would definitely do the tape flag on the stem. Now, after you know that all of these motors are rotating the right direction, go ahead and take it outside, put your props on, and in a nice safe place, go ahead and do your new maiden of your Phantom 3 Standard. Now, this video also applies to the Pro and the advanced versions of the Phantom 3, so you can do the same repair on any of those models. So thanks again for watching, you guys. Please do subscribe, because Drone Camps is going to give away free drones. We're going to try to do that weekly, as well as more DJI Phantom videos and repairs right here on the channel. And check out some of our previous videos. They're really helpful. So thanks again. I'm Justin Davis. I'll see you on the next one.